All right. Okay. Thank you for tuning in or joining my walk with God. I know I've had a lot of emails and text messages and Facebook messages as to, how things are going and where the walk with God went and when will it be back. And I was really blown away by the number of people who were following that and enjoying it. It is coming back. I am going to be doing it again very, very, very soon. I am relocating over to Marydale, Maryland. So you will be welcome out there to do the actual walk with me. I will also be joined by another good minister, which is Rob Charbonneau. And he has Soul on Fire's ministry. I learned a great deal from him. He's a very good guy, and I learned a great deal from him. And I hope he learns a little bit from me. But I was really, blown away that people like the stories and the way that I preach, is through stories people can relate to. And I think it's so much nicer to get out in with nature and to walk with nature and just to be outdoors rather than sitting in a pew, in a building where everybody's kind of falling asleep. So we're bringing this back, but today, and it's going to be coming very, very soon, about another 30 days, and we should be back 30 days or so. But I will start doing the Walk with God regularly on Sundays, doing the videos and things for people. Right now, this one is pre-recorded, so it's not live, but they will start, being live, and I'll keep everybody updated when they're going to start. But today is the day of the resurrection of Christ that we are celebrating, which is Easter. But how many of us really know about Easter and what we're really celebrating and why it is? When we think about Easter, we think about the baby chicks and the eggs and, the bunnies, and we wonder, and then the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and what do they have to do with each other? In the origins, of Easter, people say, is the origin of Easter really biblical? What does the Bible say about Easter? What is the meaning of Easter? Should Christians observe Easter? A brief history will tell us the name Easter comes from the Anglo-Saxons, the name of the goddess of spring. And bunnies, believe it or not, are a symbol of fertility, while eggs were seen as, believe it or not, a pagan symbol of death and life. And if you think about that for a minute, it kind of makes sense with the eggs. But is Easter mentioned in the Bible? If you were to search, and look up the word Easter in the Bible, you could find it mentioned only in the King James Bible, Acts 12, 1 through 4. Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. And when he apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Now, we must look first. We got to look first into the depth of the history. You see, of Easter, the details mentioned that I was just talking about, Herod Agrippa, if I said that properly, Herod, which I talked about earlier, ruler number one. He ruled from 37 AD to 44 AD, and he put James to death in his last year of reign. When one thinks of Easter throughout history, and even in the 21st century, what do we think of? Most people think of Sunday. But believe it or not, Easter did not fall on a Sunday in 44 AD. It fell on a Thursday. Now we move on to Passover. Okay? We look at the history of Easter and we find that the word Easter was substituted for the word Pesach, which really is more correctly translated to Passover. Okay? For centuries, Passover foreshadowed the death of Jesus. Believe it or not. Easter mentioned here in Acts 12 had nothing to do with Sunday. Passover is actually tied to a calendar day in the year, not a specific day of the week, much like one's birthday or wedding anniversary, or 4th of July. You celebrate the date, not the day. Just like Independence Day is not held on a Thursday of every year, even though in 1776 it was on a Thursday, but we don't celebrate it every Thursday. So what else does the Bible say about Easter? Throughout the New Testament, after the resurrection, Sunday is simply called the first day of the week, as opposed to the day of resurrection, which leads one to wonder if God placed no significance on the day. Wherein did Sunday become viewed as the weekly memorial of the resurrection? This, of course, could be a topic for another time, going into all that. Which we could go into at a later time. Excuse me. But what should be noticed is that the Jews didn't have a ceremony for the remembering of the future resurrection of Jesus. The focus was on the great sacrifice God would make on that particular Passover day of the future. Not only that, there is no biblical command to commemorate the memorization of the day of his resurrection. The silence of the New Testament and the topics should be noted, considering most of his books were written many years after Christ's death and resurrection. So, what is the true meaning of Easter? Well, let's look at the Bible for the meaning of Easter and how it relates to the resurrection of Jesus. See, the Romans showed us that the baptism instead of Easter was given as a symbol of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. Romans 6:3-5. You can find it in there. It says in Romans 6:3-5 is, or do you not know that as many of us were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. For if we have been united together in the likeness of his death, certainly we also shall be likeness of his resurrection. What we see in the true meaning is more than just a memorial of resurrection. One day a year with the church service. We can even celebrate the resurrection as we allow Christ's resurrection to become reality in our lives as we live, victoriously. Christ's death and resurrection is a daily hope of how God, or how good, will of God can overcome the forces of evil, of how truth will prevail and unmask the lie, of how love will triumph over sin, and how blessed hope of eternal life will put on the end of every death of every day. So this is a little bit of history on Easter, what we are celebrating. And I want to also say, and I want to go back to one of my first few walks with God. I, had told a story, You know, because with all this here, the one thing we still have to have is we have to understand, and we have to, and I go back to this a lot because even I have my trials and tribulations, excuse me, you know, and my faith gets tested all the time, and it does, as everybody, you know. But the one thing we have to learn, and I want to put forth this because I have to keep reminding myself too, is that God talks to us in many ways. Many, many ways God will talk to us. And we have to learn to recognize that. You know, we move so fast in life today, and the days and the nights go by so fast. And it seems like the older you get, the faster time goes. And you have to learn to take the time and slow down and relax. And as the song says, stop and smell the roses. It's an old Mac Davis song. You know, but that is true. You got to learn to stop and appreciate the beauty of all the colors of the trees and the grass and the flowers, and sometimes just listening to the wind gently blow through the trees, you know. You got to learn to appreciate life and got to slow down, because before you know it, you know, I mean, it can disappear really fast. Remember, tomorrow is never promised. I want to read you a story, you know, speaking of all this, of how God talks to people. You know, there's just a little story that says, when God whispers. The man whispered, God, speak to me. And the meadowlark sang, but the man did not hear. So the man yelled, God, speak to me. And the thunder rolled across the sky, but the man didn't listen. The man looked around and said, God, let me see you. And the stars shine brightly, but the man did not see. And the man shouted, God, show me a miracle. And a life was born. But the man, he didn't notice. So the man cried out in despair one last time, touch me, God, please. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're here. Whereupon God reached down and he touched him. But the man, he just brushed the butterfly away off of his shoulder. You know, God doesn't always have to come to you like a loud thunder in the sky or bright lightning bolts in the sky, you know, to answer you or to talk to you. A lot of times he prefers to hear a whisper. He will speak to you through your dreams if you pay attention. He'll speak to you just through your thoughts in your head. You know, a lot of times people, when I was growing up, used to say, oh, I hear that little voice in my head, and would just tell me that little voice in my head, which they call it my subconscious, you know. Oh, my subconscious told me not to do it. I just couldn't do it. But believe it or not, that's God talking to you, telling you right from wrong. It's like when that little baby, you could take a little baby and you could put a bottle of milk next to it on one side, and believe it or not, you could take another baby bottle and fill it with beer and put it next to it. And that baby might pick up that bottle of beer and take a little sip and go, oh, that's not right. And pick up that bottle of milk and know that's what it's supposed to drink, and it will drink the milk. Not because it just likes the taste over the other, but that little voice in that little baby's head is saying, this is what you drink, this is good, this is what you want. So when you say, the next time you hear somebody say, that little voice inside my head, you can kind of smile and say, that's the Lord talking to you and telling you. You know right from wrong. You know how that goes. You know, there was another story I wanted to bring up to you really quick. Yeah. This goes along the same way, and this was another one that I had done. This is really quick. You know, a young man had lost his job, and he was very upset, very aggravated, and he didn't know what to do, where to turn to, or anything. So he went to see this old preacher, and he goes into the preacher's, you know, little office there, and pacing around the study, you know, the young man's ranting about his problems and yelling and just clenching his fists. God, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know. He says, preacher, you know, tell me what to do. Just tell me, preacher, why doesn't God answer me? Why doesn't he help me? And the old preacher, who sat across the room from him, from where he was pacing, sitting behind his desk at the chair, he spoke something, and he replied to him. And it was very, very soft. He couldn't hear what he was saying, couldn't understand what he was saying. He couldn't hear. And he says again, Lord, talk to me. It's just, why does he not talk to me? And the preacher had repeated himself once again. He was still too far away. He couldn't hear him. So he walks over closer to the preacher and he catches his breath. And he has to calm down for a minute because then he has to bend down and he has to put his ear up because the preacher was speaking in such a soft voice. And he says, Preacher, I'm sorry, but I still didn't hear you. And the preacher said, sometimes, my son, God just talks in a whisper because he wants you closer to him. And if he whispers to you, you have to stop and you have to calm down and you have to listen and listen to what he says and hear him that way. But that brings you also closer to the Lord. See? That's why he doesn't always come with a roll of thunder and lightning. He doesn't do that. He wants to speak softly because he knows by speaking softly, you have to come closer to him so you can hear what he says. And you have to also remain calm because you got to calm down and you got to listen. And you forget just for that moment your problems because you're concentrating on listening and hearing. So God talks to us in many, many ways. And we just have to learn to be attuned and we have to learn to listen. So I hope I've given you a little bit of insight about Easter and given you a little bit of insight. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand because, again, if we're going to celebrate Easter and the resurrection of God, now we have to learn how to listen and listen when he talks. And he's not always going to come at you with the thunder and the lightning. We have to remember that. So on that, I will say God bless. Have a happy Easter. And I hope to see you again real soon. Keep looking for the walk with God. Thank you.
am on your shoulders, you raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can